Well, hello. I want to welcome you to another fountain pen rodeo. This time I want to talk about daily use pens, your everyday carry pen. These are the pens that you use every day. Now, you can see here I've got a list of things, but I just want to tell you, this has always been a rodeo that's been in the back of my mind. I just thought, well, that's easy. I can do it whenever, and when I'm out of thoughts, I'll just do that one. Well, when I actually sat down to do this one, oh baby. Because here's the deal. When you're looking at an everyday use pen, this is a very, very personal thing. I don't care what pens I list. Somebody's going to say, why didn't you say this one? So this is more of my personal journey rather than maybe necessarily the best pen. So a couple of things that I have on my list. And by the way, this is some paper, yes, that was loaned to me. I'm supposed to write all over it and then mail it back because this person is evaluating a few notebooks. So it's onion skin paper, which is interesting. But anyway, so I'm going to give you my personal journey. But before I do that, I feel like there's a few pens I should throw out there. The Pilot Metropolitan is actually a very nice pen. It's just not one I chose for myself. Let's see, Lamy Safari, that's a pen I use a lot. I just don't want it for my daily use pen. Lamy Studio, if you want to go a little upmarket. For a while, Noodler's Nib Creeper was my daily use pen, not long enough for me to really count it in my personal journey, but, it is an option. I know people who use the Pelikan M800 as their daily use pen, or Visconti Homo Sapiens I've heard is a daily use pen. So there's lots of choices out there, so don't be offended that your pen that you like may not be on this list. We're talking me. And perhaps I'll give you a couple ideas for what we're looking for with a pen. So let's actually just take a glance at a couple of these things I wrote down. See, I did write down a few pens. Fancy pen. I should mention that, actually. I didn't write this on here, but vintage pens. I have been using a number of vintage pens over the past year or so. A couple of them I thought, wow, that's a really sweet pen. Some of them, like the Kaweco V14S, awesome vintage pen. I have the first model of the Aurora 88. Wow, do I like that pen a lot. Let's see, there's the, Parker 51, but honestly that one didn't thrill me as much. That's an upcoming review. I've done a bunch of vintage pens, and my Centro pen is awesome, but it's not a daily use pen. And that would be a good springboard into this list. But I'll just tell you why, for me, and I know some people do use vintage pens as their daily use pens. One of the things on my list is I can lose it. I want a pen that I won't feel terrible if I lose it. I feel like this may be slightly out of focus. I don't know. Could be in my head, too. There we go. Yeah, I need a pen that I'm not afraid to lose. And for me, that puts vintage pens off the list. So the pen needs to be able to write on cheap paper, so it's probably going to be a fine or medium. I mean, this isn't me showing off an ink. This is me doing business type writing. I need to be able to lose it. It needs to work with about any ink, although I do have my favorite daily use inks. This here happens to be Pelikan Edelstein Onyx. Not one of my favorites, but it's a black that I'm trying out. For me, daily use is going to be probably a black ink. Some people prefer blue. Some of the more daring artistic sorts might use, Diatramentus Albergine or, Sailor Epinard, which I don't seem to have on this paper. Something that it's a little different, but yet it's still classy and fits in. So, but basically it needs to be able to handle the ink, which is actually something that's going to come up on this little voyage. Wet my whistle there. It can't be too wet of a pen. And I mentioned this right on cheap paper. That's partly a function of the ink also. It needs to be reliable. Some precious little pen that I have to coddle and baby. Hardy, that means it has to be able to stand up to things. You know, some delicate flower of a pen? No. I like a pen that's not flashy, and I will get to that here. I don't like a flex nib on my Daily Writer. I did have one for a while. For a while, the Noodler's Nib Creeper was my Daily Writer, and then for a while, Noodler's Conrad was my Daily Writer. Wasn't the optimal solution because of the write on cheap paper thing. And one I just added because I thought of it tonight was an ink window. So let's just look at my pens, my contenders. So my first contender is actually on this list because it was my daily use pen for many, many years, starting at about the age of 9 or 10. Because I purchased this pen when I was in 4th grade. The humble Parker Vector. Apparently it does have its fanboys or girls out there because I did get a nasty comment on my review of the Parker Vector because I didn't say enough nice things about it. Another one that's on my list, because it was my daily writer for a long time, also the first nice pen I ever bought, is this Pilot Custom 823. Now, I did mention I don't like a flashy daily use pen, so it needs to be something like this that can just kind of blend in and nobody thinks anything of it. Oh, kind of like what has been my daily use pen for a few years now. The Lamy 2000. This is actually a felt tip marker that I found on the floor in my classroom a couple days ago and said, "Hey, that looks like a Lamy 2000." Of course, they don't come in this color, but anyway, and then this is what inspired me to do this video. So, yay, what is this? Papermate Flare. So yes, the Lamy 2000 has been the winner overall. Although in terms of longevity, Parker Vector's the winner, but that had more to do with age and finances than anything else. All right, so let's see how these all compare on this list. Write on cheap paper. They actually all do a pretty good job with that if you put the right ink in them. Parker Vector for years was my pen, and I was writing on it on the cheap notebooks that you could buy. You know, the composition notebooks, the cheaper the better as far as I was concerned. You know, it would feather a little. Some notebooks it would actually bleed through, and I didn't like that. But overall, that did a pretty good job. And actually, so do these two, although I have some comments on this one when I get down to the ink thing. Can lose it. Well, the Parker Vector, I did have to spend some money on that, but even back then I could have purchased another one, so I could lose that. Nowadays, I could swing replacing either the Parker Vector. Ooh, a little dim there, isn't it? When I do the writing sample, well, I guess that's as bright as I can get it. We'll just spread them out so they have some light. The Parker Vector I could replace easily. The Lamy 2000 I'd cry, but I could replace that. Now this Pilot Custom 823, if I ever lost that, I think I would cry. And yeah, financially I could replace it, but what a blow to my savings. So yeah, probably not him. Any ink. As far as I know, the Parker Vector works with anything. Lamy 2000 has turned out to be a great pen for using for just about anything. It even works with some inks that don't work in other pens. This guy, this Pilot Custom 823, writes really well. But I had a problem. When my go-to ink, I used to use Parker Quink. I kind of gave up on that when I discovered the magical world of Noodlers. So I started using Noodler's Black, which is pretty awesome. I may be looking at other options, right now, but Noodler's Black has a lot going for it. And at the time, that was my go-to ink. Well, Noodler's Black does not play well to Pilot Custom 823. I don't know if it's too viscous or what, but right down here, there's a little... You probably can't see it. We'll try. Yeah, you can just barely make it out. Zoom in. Mechanical zoom with this camera. There's a little piston down there. And what would happen is As you write with a fountain pen, air bubbles up, gets in the chamber, and then it bubbles up and gathers in a growing bubble up here. Well, with Noodler's Black, it wouldn't bubble up. It would just stay down there. So you'd end up with a big bubble of air down here, and then before long, the feed is starved, and there's no ink, and you're done writing until you can get ink down there again. So I tried other black inks. That's why I have a bottle of Noodler's Heart of Darkness hidden on the shelf behind me. Noodler's Heart of Darkness does handle this pen very well, or I should say this pen handles it very well. I just don't care for Noodler's Heart of Darkness because it's too feathery. It doesn't handle the cheap paper as well as the Noodler's Black, which is why Heart of Darkness is not one of my contenders for daily use black. So that, I wrote with this pen for a long time as my daily writer, but then I gave up on it. I did try for a brief while, an Edison Collier. If you saw my recent video on my pen collection, you might have noticed it's no longer in that pen collection because it just didn't... Well, for one thing, it also had that starvation problem with Noodler's Black. And then for another, it was just not... Didn't meet some of these other things. It was too flashy. I just didn't like the way it wrote. It looks gorgeous. The way it writes is not for me. So anyway, I ran into a lot of extra money a couple of years back, and I'd been on a long fountain pen drought at the time, and I purchased this Lamy 2000, and that has been my daily use pen ever since. Somewhere between these two, there's a period of Noodler's Nib Creeper and Noodler's Conrad. I used to own a Cross Century. I used the Parker Vector more than I used the Cross Century. That's when I learned I don't like metal pens. So, yeah. So these are my contenders, and I've already told you the conclusion. The Lamy 2000 comes out on top. So I suppose if we're here, we should watch them write. So, we will call this, what do we call this? Everyday Carry. Wow, that is so bright. Turn that down just a bit. We'll call it an Everyday Carry Rodeo. All right, let's get a little bit closer yet. Is that maybe too dark? I think it is. There, that looks like a happy place. All right, so first contender is a Parker Vector. This is a fine point. This is not the one I purchased back in 4th grade because that one got lost in one of my moves. This is, what is this? Parker Quink. Which was my only ink up until somewhere in my 30s when I started oh, you didn't see any of that. It was my daily use ink for many years up until my 30s when I discovered Noodler's inks and bought a bottle of Noodler's Black. Some of the... Okay, no flex on this pen. Very little line variation. No real excitement. Small nib. Nothing flashy about it. So it's got all that going for it. So pros with this pen. Not flashy. It's cheap. It is actually very reliable. I got a fine nib, although it does... At the time, and still, I think it writes a little broad for a fine. It's well behaved on any paper I've thrown at it. Just pretty reliable. Oh, and yes, and by the way, all of these, I can see the ink level. See, that's why a Visconti Homo Sapiens wouldn't be my choice as a daily writer, because I can't see the ink level. I need a pen where I know I'm going to have ink. So those are some good pros. A couple of the cons with this pen. Well, right there. That is a sharp step. Sharp. It's a little small. It's kind of a boring pen. Really, not a lot of cons against it. It's just I don't care for it, probably because familiarity breeds contempt and all that. So let's set that aside. Well, I'll put this here. It's a cartridge converter pen. You know, I don't mind them. I just prefer a built-in filling mechanism, which is a true story. That's how I got into the Noodler's world, because I found out back then they only had the Noodler's Nib Creeper. But I found out, hey, here is a low-cost pen with a built-in filling mechanism. I thought that was only for expensive pens. And now, however many years later, I own some expensive pens. Here's one! Alright, so this... And by the way, the Quink Black is probably out of the running as my daily use ink. It's okay. It's a little gray for my tastes. This is the Pilot Custom 823. And it's a fine. The ink in it is Aurora Black. It's not a flex pen, but you can coax a little line variation out of it. Some of the pros here. It writes well. It's reliable. This truly is a fine. It holds a lot of ink. The vacuum filler is just cool. I sometimes hold up my pens as examples of gold plating. This one is not gold plated. That is a gold nib. I don't know if that's a pro or a con in terms of everyday carry, though. It's a little fancier looking, but it is understated. A lot of the Japanese pens are. That's something I kind of like about their aesthetic. Anything else? Oh, it's comfortable. Now, some of the cons. Big one is price. This is an expensive pen. When I bought it, I felt almost sick to my stomach. I have purchased one or two pens that are more expensive than this since then, but not very many. I think this is way at the upper limit of my comfort zone, and that's part of it. What was against it? I was nervous bringing it to school. I really was nervous if I ever loaned it to somebody or showed it to anybody. It just kind of made me nervous. And at the time, this was a con. Didn't handle Noodler's Black. That makes no sense the way I wrote it. That was huge. That's what got me looking. This does need to be cleaned more often than my Lamy 2000. The Parker Vector and the Lamy 2000 I hardly would ever clean. Parker Vector would sometimes go a couple of years between cleanings, but I was a kid and didn't know. The Lamy 2000, I inked it up in August this year, cleaned it over Christmas break. Haven't cleaned it since then, although it's been on a bit of a hiatus. The only reason I got cleaned over Christmas break is I was trying out some of those vintage pens. So, let's look at the Lamy 2000. And you'll notice all three of these are fine point nibs. I kind of like the semi-hooded nib. That's keeps it from drying out, so I can actually keep this one uncapped while I'm waiting and I'm taking notes or something at a meeting. The ink in this one is Noodler's Black. Just because of the shape of the nib, and there's some good videos on that, it does have a bit of line variation. It is a slightly differently shaped nib. So the pros, it's kind of a fun writing. And it writes well. This is a very reliable pen. Like the others, it's a fine nib. I have the broad version of this pen, and that's really nice. In a different way, as a piston filler, it has a reasonably sized ink reservoir. This is very understated. In fact, it comes out of that Bauhaus school of design. I actually would like to do my titles, if I can get artistic and creative, I would like to do my titles for these videos in kind of a Bauhaus design. You can research that and get an idea what that looks like. So I'm going to write Bauhaus. And kind of what really has going for is it's a very timeless look. And yet, at a glance, there's not really much difference. It looks like your cheap pen. Okay, let's not say looks cheap. That sounds terrible. Let's say blends in. But a very quality manufacture. And that you only notice when you pick it up and actually start looking at it. Because, as I've mentioned before, ink window there, which is nice. Very understated. Here, right where these little ears are, that's a join. If I hadn't killed the batteries in my magnifier, I'd use that right now. But they don't sell the batteries for my magnifier in my town, so I've got to wait till I'm somewhere bigger or order them on Amazon. But that's high tolerance. Down here, between the metal and the plastic, even better. Here, if I didn't point it out, you wouldn't even know there's a piston turning knob there. It's just very precise and well made. This is a quality pen. Something you don't notice until you start really looking at it closely. So yes, this is a very quality pen. And it's comfortable. You know, for me, the ideal in a pen is when it just disappears in my hand. I don't even think about the pen I'm holding. I just write. The words flow from here straight onto the paper. And then I look down, I'm like, whoa, how many pages did I just write? And I don't even notice. That's this pen. It disappears into my hand. Some people might complain about the ears. Honestly, I don't even notice them. It's just that, it's that awesome of a pen. You could take all my other pens, leave this one. And I can't say the same. You know, this one, this Pilot, doesn't disappear in my hand. The Parker Vector, well, that sharp step keeps me annoyed. But I don't remember it from when I had it before, so I don't know if that's the newer version has that sharp step, or if I just didn't know any better, or because I was younger and smaller, if I had littler hands and it just wasn't an issue. I don't know. But I like this pen. Now, there are some cons. This isn't the cheapest pen. Nowhere near what that Pilot costs, but definitely dollars. Handles just about every ink. I'm sure I could come up with another con if I wait long enough and think about it, but there's just nothing coming to me right now. Which is part of why this is my daily use pen. So we'll zoom out here, get a gander at everything I wrote. And as I said, this is a personal journey. This is not really the best everyday carry pen or anything like that. I don't feel qualified to recommend that. This is just me showing you what I've tried. Noodler's Conrad is another one I've tried. I've reviewed a lot of pens. Most of them are sort of fun, and I rotate between them. This is the pen that stays inked all the time. So I hope that was interesting. Hopefully it was useful. Even if your everyday carry pen is not one of these, which it very likely is not, I hope maybe at least I gave you some thoughts if you're looking for an everyday carry pen, for things to look for, considerations to make. And let me know how you think of video quality. I have the loan of a camcorder. It's I can see it's a Canon. I can't really remember what kind it is, but it was loaned to me for a few days just to try out. Somebody seems to think I should record my pen reviews on a camcorder instead of on a regular camera. Good thing with the camcorder is the sensor doesn't overheat because I've been going 25 minutes. That wouldn't have happened with the regular camera because the sensor would have overheated at least twice, possibly 3 times by now. So, yeah, hope this was interesting. Hope it was useful. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.